Organizations that study startup and entrepreneurial ecosystems found something really unique in Montana. We're consistently ranked as a state having one of the highest levels of startup and entrepreneurial activity.
Before COVID, there was probably 5 of us, 4 or 5 of us, full staff, and we grew to 17 people in the past year.
Our group at Inimmune's over 30 employees. Our university staff were over 60. It's been a pretty steep growth trajectory.
We're continuing to get federal funds. We apply for grants and we get grant money.
We have one of the highest rates of SBIR funding in the nation. We actually have a level 4 bioscience lab, Rocky Mountain Labs. It's an NIH facility, and GlaxoSmithKline has a facility just adjacent to Rocky Mountain.
Sometimes innovation happens slow in big pharma companies, and it can happen very fast at a university or biotech.
The University of Montana is a Carnegie Research high-activity research institution, and Montana State University is in the top 3% for its research expenditures. To form, cite, and expand here in Montana really centers firmly on return on investment.
It's peaceful here. There's year-round things to do.
And that's the quality of life that people that come here want to have, and that's what we offer.
It's tied to intellectual capital. It's the people with the presence of mind and audacity of spirit to think that they are the ones responsible for making that next big, monumental scientific discovery or cognitive leap forward. That's Montana Bio.
時間となりましたので、セレクト USA ウェビナーを開催いたします。皆様お忙しい中、ご参加いただきありがとうございます。米国総領事館商務部で対米投資を担当している中岡と申します。本日は、モンタナ州商務省提供によるモンタナ州バイオサイエンスビジネスセミナーをお届けします。プログラムに入る前に注意がございます。事前にご質問いただきありがとうございます。質問はウェビナーの最中にでも、Q&A ボックスに無記名でご入力いただけます。Q&A ボックスの方にご記入お願いいたします。すべての質問に対応できない場合は個別にご連絡をさせていただきます。本日のイベントでは同時通訳サービスがご利用できます。画面左下の地球マークが言語チャンネルです。発言者のオリジナル音声が聞こえるように、元の音声にデフォルト設定されています。発言者が英語で話す場合、メニューを日本語に変更すると日本語の通訳音声を聞くことが可能です。バランスボリュームを調整することで元の音声をかすかに聞きながら通訳音声を聞くことが可能です。元の音声を聞かずに通訳の音声のみを聞きたい場合は、バランスボリュームを一番右にします。それではプログラムを始めます。最初に米国大使館上席商務官ヘザー・コーネルからご挨拶申し上げます。ヘザーさん、over to you.
Thank you very much. Konnichiwa. And thank you for participation in the Montana Bioscience Business Seminar. My name is Heather Connell, and I am a commercial officer at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. Established by the President in 2011, Select USA is a U.S. government-wide program led by the U.S. Department of Commerce. Our mission is to facilitate job-creating business investment into the United States and raise awareness of the critical role that economic development plays in the U.S. economy. My team and I can provide the information, tools, and connections that business investors need to succeed in the United States and beyond. Today, I am delighted to welcome Montana Department of Commerce and Montana World Trade Center with distinguished panelists who are the leaders of the bioscience industry. You will learn why they chose Montana and how the local ecosystem helps businesses to grow. I hope you will find today's program to be helpful in your investment planning efforts, and we look forward to assisting you in any way that we can. ありがとうございます。
ありがとうございました。続きまして、モンタナ州商務省スコット・スターマン長官からのご挨拶です。
Greetings and good morning to all the attendees from Japan. I am very pleased to convene the session today. I see this event as emblematic of my desire to begin partnering more intentionally with our Japanese friends on many fronts. And I recognize and I am thankful that today's exchange is in part due to the legacy of Montanans and Japanese who have come before us, such as the late U.S. Senator from Montana and U.S. Ambassador to Japan, Mike Mansfield. Mr. Mansfield was considered an authority on U.S.-Asia relations and tackled bilateral trade and defense issues during his tenure at the U.S. Embassy in Tokyo. He said, and I quote, "I believe that one day America and the other nations clustered along the shores of the Pacific will be neighbors along the lake, a closely interwoven community sharing common interests and common goals." As we look to the present and future, I believe we can all agree Montana and Japan are both known for innovation research and advances within the bioscience sector. Montana ranks in the top 5 of the United States for growth in academic bioscience research and development expenditures. And Japan has one of the most advanced bioscience and biotechnology sectors in the world, as evidenced by the number of patents generated. Therein lies the opportunity to increase redundancy in supply chain in terms of Montana-based suppliers, research and development partnerships, and manufacturing projects. Montana and Japan already share strong ties within the agricultural sector of our state, most notably Nippon Flour Mills, acquisition of Pasta Montana in the early 2000s, as well as Japanese firms owning numerous grain elevators within the state. So I welcome the dialogue today regarding the bioscience sector, and I hope this event will be foundational and to enhanced relationships between Montana and Japan for many years to come. Thank you for your interest in Montana. I hope you enjoy the seminar.
続きまして、モンタナ州政府駐日代表事務所の紹介について、駐日代表の坂口真子様よりお願いします。
おはようございます。モンタナ州政府駐日代表事務所駐日代表の坂口真子と申します。本日は新年度初めのお忙しい中、モンタナ州初のビジネスセミナーへ多数ご参加いただきありがとうございます。皆様のご参加があり、セミナーが実現できましたことを大変嬉しく思っております。長官の挨拶にもありました通り、モンタナ州と日本との関係は長く、日本はモンタナ州の対輸出国上位5位に位置しています。当事務所も1982年に姉妹提携関係を結んだ熊本県県庁内に事務所を構え、全国に向けてモンタナ州への投資、観光客誘致、州内高校、大学への留学、そして文化交流促進のために活動しています。さまざまな活動を通じて、州政府はもちろん、州内の自治体、経済団体、大学など、州内で提供されているあらゆるサービス、最新の情報を取り扱っています。アメリカ北西部、カナダ3州と接する国境沿いに位置するモンタナ州は、アメリカで4番目に広く、日本とほぼ同じ面積です。日本国内では広大な面積を生かして生産される農作物の一大生産地として知られていますが、ビジネスを行う上でも充実したインフラ、競争力のあるビジネスコストとビジネス環境にも恵まれています。本日のセミナーでは、州内でバイオサイエンス関連事業を行う利点について、実際にモンタナを選択し、 州内で事業を行われている方々のお話をお聞きいただきます。後半には質疑応答の時間も設けておりますので、この機会にモンタナでのビジネスについてお尋ねいただければ幸いです。また、6月にアメリカで開催されるセレクト USA のスピンオフイベントとして、ジェトロセレクト USA 投資ミッションモンタナコースの提供を予定しております。6月16日、17日の2日間、モンタナ州内の NIH ファシリティであるロッキーマウンテン研究所 GSK、本日のパネルのお一人、エバンス博士が所長を務められますモンタナ大学応用医学センター、日系企業の訪問が組み込まれた日程となっております。さらなるビジネス拡大のチャンスをお探しの日本企業にとって、モンタナでビジネスを行うメリットを見聞きしていただける絶好の機会となっておりますので、ぜひこちらもご検討ください。セミナー終了後、セミナーの内容、またご紹介しましたジェトロセレクト USA 投資ミッションモンタナコースなど、モンタナについてご質問がございましたら、お気軽に当事務所へお問い合わせください。本セミナーがご参加いただきました皆様にとって、モンタナ州を知っていただく機会となり、新たなビジネス展開へつながりますことを期待しております。本日のご参加、大変ありがとうございます。
次に、モンタナワールドトレードセンターエグゼクティブダイレクター、ブリジッタ・ミランダ・フリーヤ氏より、モンタナバイオサイエンスクラスターイニシアチブのご紹介をお願いします。その後、続けてパネルディスカッションに入ります。では、ブリジッタさん、よろしくお願いします。ブリジッタ、floor to you.
Konnichiwa, and thanks, Mako, for those opening remarks, and thanks to all of you for participating in this session today. As Scott mentioned, and Mako, I'm with the Montana World Trade Center, and many of you may be familiar with the World Trade Centers Association. There are about 300 World Trade Centers in 100 countries around the globe, and as an association, we believe in prosperity for all through trade. Today's topic, of course, is focused on how we may be able to build mutually beneficial trade and investment in bioscience between Montana and Japan. If we think of bioscience in the simplest terms, it's really about feeding, fueling, and healing the world. Montana has been a global player in the first two categories for a century, and I'm pleased to be able to share with you today the current state of Montana's bioscience industry, more specifically focusing on our business case for biopharma, which has really been a natural evolution of our expertise in the first two areas of bio. Montana's biopharma expertise is diverse and it's deep. I'm coming to you now from the University of Montana campus. is a top-tier R1 research institution with researchers focused on discovery and commercialization of novel vaccines, including vaccines to combat cancer and opioid addiction. We also have specialization in neuroscience, including traumatic brain injury. The McLaughlin Research Center in Great Falls, Montana, to our north, has done pioneering work relating to Alzheimer's and other brain disease. Bozeman, Montana, 3 hours to our east, and is known for its gene editing research, including CRISPR, non-opioid pain treatments, as well as photonics and optics technologies that are essential components in laboratory research and commercialization. We even have a biosafety level 4 lab, an NIH facility called Rocky Mountain Labs in Montana, where nationally renowned researchers study some of the nastiest viruses on the earth. In fact, Rocky Mountain Labs had 5 teams dedicated to COVID-19 throughout the pandemic. Beginning even before the first cases of novel coronavirus were confirmed in the US, RML was working to develop testing, possible vaccines, and antiviral medications. So the last thing I'll touch on before we move to the panel is why Montana for bio. And I'll give you my take on the top 3 points of differentiation that may indeed be beneficial to you and to your firm someday. Since our topic is bio today, I will use a plant metaphor. First, Montana consistently ranks near the top of indices that study startups and entrepreneurial activity. That means that we have abundant, agile companies that are often the key to growth for big pharma. These are our seeds. Second, we're very successful at securing government funding in support of our early stage research that can later be commercialized. Montana companies have the highest success rate in the United States for Small Business Innovative Research and Small Business Technology Transfer Awards. And you saw in that video at the start in 2019, over 50% of Montana SBIR submissions to the National Institute of Health were funded. This is our water. Third, knowledge-based industries of all kinds are thriving in Montana. These workers demand the kind of environment that we have, with immediate, abundant access to outdoors, vibrant small cities that foster a real sense of place, and happy employees mean lower turnover and higher ROI for your firm. This is our sunshine. So with that, I'd like to introduce you to our panelists, because I could talk all day about Montana, but I think you'd rather hear from industry directly. Joining us today are Dr. Rob Goodwin. He is CEO of Bibliome Therapeutics and founder of Ligosite, which was acquired about a decade ago by Takeda. Dr. Jay Evans, who is the director for the Center for Translational Medicine at the University of Montana, and also co-founder, president, and CEO of Inimmune. And I believe they will put a hyperlink to bios in the chat. Very good. So let's see. Rob, let's start with you. In my brief overview of Montana bioscience expertise, I really could only touch on the highlights. Can you provide some more detail about your particular areas of focus currently, and maybe even share a bit about your journey with Ligosite and its eventual acquisition?
Yes, Ita, it's nice to see you, and ohayou gozaimasu to all of the panel participants. I have this company, Bibliome, is focused on small molecule kinase inhibitors, and kinase control how cells communicate with each other, and also the communication.
Sorry to interrupt, just a quick check. I want to make sure that everyone can hear you, Rob, because I can't hear you at all.
Okay, let's try that again. One moment.
I can hear you just fine, Rob.
Okay, good. Thanks. So, good. Thank you. I don't know what I did, but it fixed it. So Bibliome is developing small molecule kinase inhibitors. These are the type of drugs that are useful in fighting cancer and also in fighting immune diseases. And today, the oncology market, which is about $150 billion worldwide, about 1/3 of that is related to kinase inhibitors. So it's been a very successful class of drugs. And at Bibliome, we're working to make those drugs more effective and also to target new pathways for cancers where those drugs don't exist yet. And prior to Bibliome, I was with a company called Takeda, which is well known in Japan. Takeda was interested in growing their vaccine division. It was a very important decision to have made about a decade ago, prior to the global pandemic of COVID. Takeda looked around the world and wanted to do global division. They've been making vaccines in Japan for many years, but those vaccines were only used in the Japanese market. And as Takeda looked for a company that would be a good company to acquire to start a new division, they came to us at Ligosite in Montana, and we had discussions, and Takeda decided to acquire our company. And I worked in Takeda as a vice president for 5 years. Many trips to Japan, really had a wonderful experience there. The company that we grew, Ligosite, was an immunology company. And even when we were growing Ligosite, we were fortunate to have investment money from venture capitalists, venture capital firms, and also corporate venture firms. So we have a long relationship with Japan.
Excellent. Thanks for sharing that, Rob. I appreciate it. So I'm going to go back and forth between our panelists here just to keep them engaged throughout. So Jay, let's go over to you. You wear at least two hats, and in your role with the Center for Translational Medicine and with Inimmune. So I wonder if you could start us off by sharing a bit more about the University of Montana's Center for Translational Medicine and kind of what that center's role is in Montana's bioscience ecosystem.
No, absolutely. You can hear me okay, Brigitte and Rob?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'm just making sure I could talk for
Yeah.
a while and find and no one could hear me. Anyways, no, first, thanks for the invitation to participate in this. Unlike Rob, we don't have our company and our center doesn't have a lot of history and connections in Japan. So this is an exciting time for us to be able to find collaborators and partners for some of our programs. Start off with at the University of Montana, as Brigitte said, I'm director of the Center for Translational Medicine here at the University of Montana. This center was started in early 2016. There were a group of about 15 scientists, including me, that had worked in big pharma for most of our careers. I worked at GSK for about 16 years, and came to the University of Montana and recognized the need for support for investigators and researchers here at the university to translate their ideas from something that works in a lab to something that can help people. And so we call that, translational medicine, translating the discoveries that happen in the lab to medicines and treatments and devices that can help people. So that's really the mission of the center, and it's broad-based. It covers everything from small molecule drugs to things in with our pharmacy school to medical devices and other treatments, or even tests that can help the medical community. And so what we do is we reach out to investigators in the lab and students and postdocs who have discoveries and help them shepherd those ideas either through companies or through partners or joint ventures into medicines that can help people. As Brigitte said, on a similar note, I'm also president and CEO of Inimmune. And we have, as you might imagine, a very strong public-private partnership with the University of Montana, where we go after NIH grants and contracts and other sources of federal dollars that help us build research programs with the idea of discovering new medicines or devices that then we can translate into medicines and commercialization in ways that can help people. So we really do the full spectrum from early discovery, working with students in the lab, up through doing clinical trials and advancing treatments and vaccines and immunotherapies that can help.
Yes, and you're very modest, Jay. I know that in this last year or so, you've secured quite a lot of SBIR and/or STTR funding, right? There was a major award that came through.
Yeah, so like I mentioned, we founded this group in January 2016 in collaboration with the University of Montana and some of our corporate and other academic partners. Since that time, we've raised about $100 million in non-dilutive NIH funds to support these research and development activities, focused primarily around vaccines and immunotherapeutics. So we've seen great growth. Like I said, we started with about 15 people in 2016. And now at Inimmune, we're at about 32, and at the university, we're between 50 and 60 vaccine researchers in this team. And we'll have multiple products in the next 18 months going to phase 1. One of those that Brigitte had mentioned was an opioid vaccine program, which will be moving to phase 1 clinical trials in about 12 months, targeting fentanyl is the first target there.
Excellent. Since you just mentioned VC in part of your comments there, this is a question that I'll put to you both. I think both of your firms have secured some additional venture capital or first round of VC funding in the last 12 months. So I want to ask you to sort of put your VC hat on, or when you were in negotiations with those firms, How do VCs perceive Montana startups like yours in the broader context of the many investments they could make? I mean, is there something about the Montana business case that they see as valuable? Obviously, you see something. Rob, maybe I'll go to you first.
Yeah, that's a very interesting question, Brigitte. I think that it's never been, I would say, less difficult to raise money into Japan than it is, or into Montana than it is today. Mostly because Montana has become well known for its beautiful nature and high skiing and fly fishing, and in many ways, it's a vacation destination for a lot of people. But at the same time, I think that there's a growing recognition that the quality of science and business that happens in Montana is equal to what you would find in San Francisco on the West Coast or in Boston on the East Coast. And so when we combine those two things together, we have a high quality of work, a very hard-working work ethic, very honest approach to science and what you know and what you don't know. And we do that in a beautiful environment. And it's because all of those things are more recognized now that it's quite simple to attract venture capital. It's almost as if the location is the same as if we were in Boston or San Francisco.
Thanks, Rob. Jay, what's your take on that?
Yeah, I agree completely with Rob. Of course, I would never disagree with Rob. But no, absolutely. I mean, having worked as Rob in Montana in the pharmaceutical and biotech space for a long time, I actually think that if you had asked me the same question 10 years ago, I would have given a different answer. I think in the past, I think raising capital funds in Montana has been challenging. We were considered a flyover state. Venture capital funds were focused on the coasts here in the U.S. I think that's changed over the last 10 years, especially I think COVID has actually helped that. Now people communicate in different ways. Board meetings no longer happen in person, they happen via Zoom. And so for investors to think they have to, to fly to Montana in January, if they're not a snow person or ski, they don't want to come here in January for a board meeting. And now they don't have to, they can do it via Zoom. So I think Montana's being more and more recognized every day as a place where technology advances and innovation happens. So investors are looking here to make investments, and they're seeing that it's a great place to invest. And the employees here, as Rob mentioned, stay here because of quality of life. We don't have the employee turnover that some of the other companies realize when they're on the coasts. I mean, Inimmune, for example, we've been here since January 2016. We're up to 32 employees. I think over 6 years, we've had 4 employees leave, which that's unheard of if you talk to companies that are in Boston or San Francisco or Seattle. And that reflects in the progress we make with those investor dollars.
That's true.
Yeah,
I was just going to add, one of the things that both Jay and I have experienced as we've grown the workforce for these companies is that we often find people who had ties to Montana in the past and have either left the country or moved to Boston or San Francisco and have a desire to return as they develop their careers and become more senior and can make those decisions about where they'd like to live. At least half of our employees, we only have a small team of about 12 people. Half of them had ties to Montana, either had worked here in the past or had studied in Montana, and they were very interested to return to live in Montana once again. There's something about the state that really attracts those return people.
Yeah. many different types of people have an affinity connection to this state, whether they have passed through or they studied here previously or were born here. I wasn't born here, although I've been here for 25 years, so I consider myself a transplant evangelist for this state. And you know, Jay, you touched on that concept of loyal talent. You touched on the concept of the quality of life. And honestly, being in economic development, I kind of shy away from that phrase because I think everyone uses that phrase and it's so overused that I think that sometimes it doesn't have the meaning that we want it to. But I think where it really has meaning for businesses is in the turnover piece that you reference right there. So if you have loyal talent and lower turnover, that positively impacts your bottom line. And that is why knowledge-based industries of all kinds are thriving in Montana, because they really, you know, their workers are demanding the types of amenities that we have here. And Montana was on this trajectory for a number of years, certainly since I've been here over the last 2 decades, more and more people discovering this place and making the choice to be here and maybe move from a big city like Washington, D.C., like I did, or the coast that you both referenced. But I think since with the advent of the pandemic, what we've seen is just this hockey stick growth curve, right? So more and more people moving here, not only for the jobs that exist here right now with companies like yours, but coming because they were granted permission to live anywhere, and this is the choice that they made. So good for Montana, good for all of us who are here right now, and hopefully good for all of the businesses that might be considering operating out of our state in the future. So I want to talk a little bit about, let's see, we talked about VCs. I want to talk a little bit about Rocky Mountain Labs, which I mentioned in the introduction to this. So Rocky Mountain Labs, again, that's a biosafety level 4 lab. It's the most secure research facility in Hamilton, Montana, which is about 45 minutes to the south of where I'm sitting tonight. Jay, can you talk to us a little bit about how you've worked with Rocky Mountain Lab and what benefit you've seen to having proximity to that lab in the past?
No, absolutely. I've worked with some of the researchers down at Rocky Mountain Labs for nearly 20 years now. From my time at GSK when I worked down in Hamilton to now here in Missoula. It's obviously an exceptional research facility with their biosafety level 2, 3, and 4 research labs, which focus on many different infectious pathogens. As a vaccine immunotherapeutics company, it's invaluable us to have those experts there and collaborators. A good example that you mentioned early on that the researchers at Rocky Mountain Labs started working on COVID very early, even before the first cases were noted in the U.S. Very shortly after the first few cases were in the U.S., we started working on a COVID vaccine. NIH called us and said, we need you to transition resources over to working on a vaccine for COVID. Of course, at the time, there were no challenge models. We didn't know very much about the virus. So we had to reach out to our friends down at Rocky Mountain Labs, and they already had started developing challenge models in their labs to test vaccines. So when we had these early vaccine candidates ready to go, we were able to send them right down the valley to Hamilton, about 45 minutes away, and get them tested in animal models before those animal models were readily available in other research institutions. We also have collaborations with them on things like Lyme disease and other rickettsial-based diseases. That's diseases transmitted by insects, which is a focus down there. And we have multiple ongoing collaborations and projects. We also share students. The University of Montana has sent students down there to do research. And we oftentimes hire people who've gone to Rocky Mountain Labs for training. We have several people in our lab here that did their training down at Rocky Mountain Labs. Again, the common thing, people go there to work and they don't want to leave. And so they look for jobs other places around the state, which allows them to stay local.
So I'll go to you in a second, Rob, but Jay, since you just talked about that, they don't want to leave, it reminds me that I might have robbed you of the opportunity to talk a little bit more about your origin story for Inimmune, because you founded Inimmune at a very specific time for a very specific reason. Tell us about your origin story with Inimmune, please.
No, happy to. As I mentioned, I spent a good part of my career working at GlaxoSmithKline Vaccines, and they have a facility down in Hamilton, Montana. Unfortunately, there was someone who was supposed to be here tonight and couldn't because a medical reason came up. But they have a GSK Vaccines has a facility in Hamilton, Montana, where they manufacture vaccines and adjuvants. It's where I worked for many years. When they were doing some consolidation, after acquiring other vaccine companies, they decided they were going to move a lot of their research and development efforts over to Rockville, Maryland. So they came to our team that had been there since 1980, about 35 years, and came to that team and said, hey, if you want jobs, they'll be in Rockville, Maryland, but we understand that you may not want to go because you have such a great place to live. We'll support you in doing something else. And we worked really closely with GSK and the University of Montana and NIH to relocate our research team up here to Missoula, which is about an hour north. We had one person went to Rockville out of our team. Everybody else either stayed in Hamilton and worked at GSK or came up here to Missoula to start this new research endeavor. And keeping all that talent was one of the reasons we've been so successful and had a great launch here in Missoula at the University of Montana.
We're glad you didn't decide to go to Rockville, Jay. Good choice. I've lived in Rockville before.
Yeah. Nothing about, I mean, there are a lot of people out there that enjoy living in big cities and enjoy the things that has to offer, and great for them. But for those people that like the little bit smaller town community feel and the outdoors, I can't think of a better place.
Well, so for me, I felt when I moved to Montana, it was a gift that I got back, and it was the gift of time. When I lived in Washington, D.C., my commute to work was an hour and 40 minutes each way every day. My commute from work was the same. Here, I live on the side of a mountain, actually, this mountain behind me, and I am 12 minutes from my office. So I think that it's just, yeah, it really makes a difference, and it certainly has impacted my my decisions and my family's decisions about our desire to be here for the long term. Rob, I want to circle back with you quickly on the Rocky Mountain Labs front. I think, given the nature of your work right now, maybe there's not too much engagement that you have with them, but correct me if I'm wrong on that, please.
True. Most of what we work in is in the fields of cancer therapies and immune diseases. But
right.
As many people now realize, there are poor outcomes from viral infections like with COVID or other viruses like influenza virus, where certain people do very poorly if they get sick. They can end up in the hospital and sometimes they can die. And the thing that causes death in many cases is the body's reaction to the virus as the virus is killing cells. And we talked about what we do at Vibliome in terms of looking at how cells communicate both inside the cells and outside of the cells. And there are pathways that tell cells to grow, and that's when those pathways are turned on incorrectly, that's what causes tumors and what causes cancer. And there are pathways which also cause cells to die in different ways. And sometimes when cells die in a clean and orderly way, it's called apoptosis. Cells do it naturally all the time. But there are messy ways in which cells die. One of those is called necroptosis, where they kind of blow up and they dump their contents in the lung, for example, in the case of a viral infection. And the body's response to that is severe. And oftentimes that's what causes patients to die from severe respiratory infections. So we're interested in those pathways. And as those programs progress, we would go to a place like Rocky Mountain Lab to put our drugs in those same models that Jay was talking about, challenge models with COVID virus or influenza virus or other viruses, to study how we might be able to develop a therapy to save people's lives when they're in those critical in the hospital.
Right, and I feel a little bit bad for our interpreters who might be trying to interpret and translate these things. Thank you for your efforts on that front. You know, we've talked about making connections and working with Rocky Mountain Labs, and I think one of the other reasons that I wanted to have you guys both comment on the work that you have done there or would do there is because I think that that connection is emblematic of how it is to connect across our state. It's an easy connection to make. You can immediately have access to the people that can help you to move you forward. And I think that that's not just true for Rocky Mountain Labs. I think that is true across our state. I mean, it is partly due to the fact that we have such a small population base in our state, but it is very easy to make connections here. We say, even though we are mountainous, it is very flat, so very easy to make connections. That is my opinion. Do you concur with that, Jay or Rob?
I do. I think being a small state, we're always in a smaller research community. I think we're always looking to make connections. One of the slides that I show when I talk about our center at the university, or I talk about our company, are the connections we have. And it's, you know, we have connections with other companies and university labs that we do collaborate with all over the world. And I'm sad to say that one of those lines that I haven't drawn yet is between us and Japan. And it's something I would like to do. And so we're always looking for collaborators and opportunities.
Yes, and I would agree as well. It's a very supportive business community in general in Montana, and it has the feeling of a very large small town where we know each other and we're supportive of each other, and we can make contacts that are useful to each other. And just like Jay, we work all around the world. We have collaborations in Italy, Spain, Germany, the UK. We have a collaboration in Japan as well. But the collaborations that we can foster in Montana are always the easiest. If you call somebody, they will answer their phone and talk to you. Right. And it's very, very easy.
Yes, it was almost disarming when I first moved to the state, how willing people were to sort of drop what they were doing to have a conversation with you, to help you. And I do think that connectivity that exists and the willingness to help others to help them succeed is really part of the reason that our startup ecosystem is so very strong in the state. You know, we have maybe 5 more minutes here, and I want to try to cover a couple more questions quickly. So I'd like to have maybe Rob comment first, and then we'll go to Jay. You know, Rob, you are based in Bozeman, Montana, which is near the Montana State University. And I want to know, to what extent do you engage with MSU in your research and development efforts or securing workforce, or what does that look like for you?
Yeah, that's a very good question, Brigitte. We're very close with Montana State University. When we set up our laboratory, we built them out in a building that's across the street from the university, because there's an opportunity to foster collaboration, and there's a lot of good work that happens there. It's also the case that Montana State University makes its core available to companies in the area. So when we develop drugs, if we want to look at the composition of those drugs and check purity and chemical reaction success, we can walk those samples across the street University and use their nuclear magnetic resonance machine. Now, that's a piece of equipment that we would never be able to afford as a small company. We may send it to a vendor in another city, but to be able to walk it across the street and work with the Montana State University to gather those data is very simple and easy to do. And we also are able to take advantage of models that help us look at drug kinetics when we inject a drug, understand how long the drug lasts to help inform dosing. Those are studies that we can run at Montana State as well. Most of the time, they're much less expensive than going to a large preclinical vendor, which may be in a different, or again, in Boston or San Francisco.
Right. Jay, how about you?
You know, it should be apparent from my title that we're very closely linked and to the. I'm sitting in my office at the University of Montana right now. I go back and forth between my office at Inimmune and the University of Montana every day. We're close, similar to what Rob said. We're right across the river here from campus, short drive or walk. Several people like me have split appointments between the company and the university, which helps foster that collaboration and interaction. One of the things that's made us so successful is our ability to do that public-private partnership and go after NIH grants and contracts that are focused on translation, taking those ideas and research discoveries that happen at the university and take them to a company setting where you can develop them and manufacture them in a way that makes it easier to get them into phase 1 clinical trials into treatments that can help people. And so that's what our center is focused on here at the university. And so we work with a lot of companies, including Inimmune. But like Rob, the university is very accommodating. All the core facilities on campus are open to companies to come in. Of course, you have to pay for the services or time, but it's much less expensive than going to a service provider outside the university or shipping your compound somewhere to get those same tests done.
And I would be remiss if I didn't point out that your company, Inimmune, actually got its start in the physical technology incubator that is right across the river from the University of Montana. That's called Montech. And that is in the process of undergoing an expansion over the next 18 months. We see that as part of an innovation corridor gateway project. So stay tuned on that, everyone who may be listening. I know that Yuko would like us to turn it back over soon, but I want to just give our two speakers here 30 seconds apiece. You have the opportunity right now to just say, why Montana for biopharma? Off the top of your head, Rob, go. What do you think?
Montana, because it's a beautiful place to live that stimulates creative and innovative thinking. And at the end of the day, that's where new drugs come from for patients.
Yes, thank you. Jay, how about you?
I would say it's because Montana's a community. It's not a city. It's not like living in a big city. It's where people come to vacation, and we get to live and work here. It's a common thing, but it's also, for students. I'm here at the University of Montana. The opportunities for students here are amazing. We bring students and undergraduates and graduate students. For student exchanges with universities or places in Japan and internship opportunities. It's a great place for students to look, to spend some time, to come here, whether it's for a summer internship or a degree, whether it's Montana State, University of Montana, Montana Tech. And oftentimes the companies in Montana hire from those universities for people starting their careers.
Yes, and I'm really glad that you ended on that note. The workforce pipeline that does exist here because of our university system is very, very strong. So thanks for bringing that up. So Yuko, I know that there was a question that came in pre-session, but I think that you were planning on asking that. If I'm wrong, please tell me. But with that, I think this section of our program is done.
Thank you very much. ブリジッタさん、エヴァンス博士、そしてグッドウィン博士、どうもありがとうございました。それではここから、質疑応答に入ります。で、すでにディスカッションの中で触れたかもしれないんですけれども、まず一つ目の質問が、エヴァンス博士への質問です。バイオファーマの研究開発において、モンタナ大学と共同連携する機会があるとすれば、どのようなものが、あると思われますか？で、例えばマイコプラズマ感染症などはどうでしょうか？という質問をいただきました。
No, great question. I can speak, for our research team that's focused on vaccines and immunotherapy. We work on a lot of different pathogens, and honestly, right now, Mycoplasma is not one of them. But for example, we started a Lyme disease program just a couple years ago because through a collaboration, we've started most of our programs because someone's come to us who has an expertise in a given area. In some specific pathogen like Mycoplasma, and we're experts on vaccine discovery and design, adjuvants, immunostimulants. You partner those two programs together, and suddenly you have new ideas and new therapeutics. So we're always looking to partner with people, especially that bring technologies or expertise or different diseases to target that we currently don't have platforms on.
ありがとうございます。次に、グッドウィン博士への質問です。先ほどお話の中で、日本とのパートナーシップがあるとおっしゃっていましたが、どのようなことを共同でされているのか差し支えなければ教えてください。
Yes, happy to talk about that. In our drug discovery work, we often have drugs that we develop that we want to test. And there are some very good companies in Japan that work in our area. We work with, it is called Karna Biosciences in Kobe, and they are experts at developing kinase enzyme assays. So we need someone to do the testing on our drugs that we develop. Karna offers testing service for kinase inhibitor drugs, and it's a perfect collaboration. And as we develop those drugs and they're ready to go into clinical trials, at that point, we will partner with a pharmaceutical company, which could be a Japanese pharmaceutical company or a global pharmaceutical company that's headquartered in Japan, for example, of which there are many. And those companies then would take the drugs we develop and take them into clinical trials to show that they work in people to fight disease.
ありがとうございます。お二人に質問なんですけれども、今後どのような組織、都市、団体、研究者との連携を希望していますか？
Well, I'll take it first and then I'll hand it to Jay. The ideal partnership for my company on the research side is to find scientists who are experts in communication pathway inside of cells. And what we like to do is to team up with those scientific experts who know a lot about the biology and then find a way to turn that understanding into a drug that can be given to patients. So we love those kinds of collaborations. And we also always welcome collaborations where we can work together to test those drugs in human patients in clinical trials.
Yeah, I would echo what Rob said. I mean, there's many different places where we have collaborators. First is on the early discovery research side. We're a vaccine and immunotherapy company. And so we depend on others to help bring us targets to go after, and they might be experts in those areas. If we're going to work in immuno-oncology, we look for collaborators who are experts in immuno-oncology, where we can apply our special innate immune compounds to different types of cancers in different ways. Likewise, we might partner with another company, like a company in Japan that has a vaccine candidate that they need a better delivery system for, or a better immunostimulant to help that vaccine work better. The two companies can partner together to launch a new product that neither company could do on their own. And the third would be partners who can help take lead candidate drugs that we're moving through clinical trials now, and bring those into the Japanese market and clinical trials in Japan, so that we're not so U.S. centered or U.S. focused. It's important for drugs to be tested, internationally, and so they become widely available when they become launched, and for a bigger impact on global health.
ありがとうございました。では、最後にもうすでにモンタナでビジネスをする魅力については十分にお伝えいただきたい、お話の中で伺ったんですけれども、最後にもしまだ何かこれだけはということが、あれば、モンタナ州が他の州と違う強みについて最後にもし何かあれば一言お願いします。
To not repeat what we said earlier.
I didn't hear if that was a question for someone specifically or not. Outside of the things that we've already said, it's probably worth mentioning that Montana always compares very favorably on taxes. For example, we don't have sales tax here. That's one extra piece of information that we haven't shared.
And also the cost of business is very low in Montana compared to Boston or San Francisco. It's a fraction of the cost to run a laboratory in Montana.
ありがとうございました。それでは最後に、冒頭でも触れましたが、モンタナ州の、バイオ再生産業を、現地視察できるミッションが、ジェトロ様主催で開催されますので、ちょっとそのお話とサミットのお話をして、最後にしたいと思います。次のスライドお願いします。このウェビナーでご紹介したモンタナ州のバイオサイエンスクラスターを実際に見ることができる、またとない機会となっております。2022年6月16日から17日、我々米国商務省主催のセレクト優勢投資サミットに合わせて行われるジェトロ主催のミッションとなっております。で、本日残念ながら、GSK、からのスピーカーの方が、健康上の理由で、出席できなかったんですけれども、こちらの、視察ミッションでは、実際にその GSK のワクチンファシリティ、製造拠点、モンタナ大学、それからロッキーマウンテンラボなどを、研究所を、複数訪問するプログラムとなっております。次のスライドお願いいたします。そして、このジェトロ様主催の米国ビジネス投資環境視察ミッションは、私どもの本部である米国商務省主催のセレクト USA 投資サミットに合わせて行われます。セレクト USA 投資サミットでは、連邦、州政府要人やビジネス界のトップリーダーによる講演などを通じて、米国でのビジネス戦略を考える上で参考になる情報が得られるほか、併設される各州の展示ブースでは、ワンストップで、経済開発の担当者から、各州の情報を得られる機会となっています。モンタナ州も出展します。 これらのプログラムを通じて、米国の投資ビジネス環境を多角的にご理解いただくとともに、今後の事業立案にお役立てれば幸いです。ゼトロのミッション、視察ミッション、そしてサミットに関する情報はイベント終了後に、メールにてご案内いたします。それでは本日のウェビナーを終了いたします。後ほどアンケートをお送りしますので、回答お願いいたします。本日はありがとうございました。Thank you very much.
ありがとうございました。